Hey everyone, this is Brandon from Vintage King, and today I have the privilege of showing you Strymon's new Magneto module. So the Magneto is Strymon's first foray into Eurorack synthesis. It's based on the D-tape algorithm, which is found in the Strymon timeline pedal, and basically just broken out and extrapolated upon with tons and tons of CV I/O and hands-on control. It features 4 independent tape heads with feedback control for each tap. We have 3 functions of the Magneto. We have an echo, which is more of a traditional tape echo. We have a looper function, which kind of simulates a sound-on-sound guitar looper pedal. And then we have the sampler, which has transport control. And then just below that, we have our low cut, which is basically just going to cut out our low frequencies. We have tape age, which is basically just going to darken the repeats a little bit, or a lot. We have the crinkle knob, which is going to basically simulate a poorly maintained tape, old, degraded tape. So it goes from fresh, clean reel all the way to just completely damaged, stepped-on reel. And then to the right of that, we have wow and flutter, which is basically simulating mechanical defects in a tape delay. And then finally to the right of that, we have our spring reverb. At the top here, we obviously have our speed or pitch for the delay line. And to the left, we have our signal inputs. We have our dry control. And we actually have a record level as well, which can be overdriven if you like. It sounds fantastic. To the right of that, we have our tap tempo button for the echoes, which also serves double duty in some different modes. And to the right of that, we have our wet control. And then finally, down below, our master repeat or feedback knob. Moving back to the left here, we have some control over the rate at which we repeat. Basically, it's a time division switch. When Magneto is either tap tempoed in or receiving a clock, we can have the option of having even repeats, triplet repeats, and then this switch here actually switches into a shimmer. So all the repeats are shifted an octave up. It sounds really crazy. And then to the right of that, we have our pan select switch. This actually has a really cool hidden feature where we can hold down the feedback buttons and actually place these tape heads in the stereo field. As you can see above, we can pan this one left, sort of these two center, as we hold down each button, of course. Obviously, we have our CV breakouts, our inputs and outputs, to control every single knob on the Magneto. A couple things to note, which is really cool, is we actually have a clock out. We can take Magneto's tap tempo and clock other modules and devices with it. So just sort of moving down here to the right, we have our speed control, obviously, for this knob. We have our dry wet knob, which I actually have hooked up right now to the voltage block. Plug that back in. Our repeat rate, clock 1 out, clock 2 out, clock 3 out, and clock 4 out. So these are all based upon each individual tape head. Each one can have a different rate or speed. Below that, we have our spring wet dry, which basically just turns this knob here, and tap tempo, of course. And then we can also control our transport, which we'll get into in the sampler function. We have our pause, our play, forward, reverse, and then infinite loop. To the left of that, we have our shift amount, record gate, which we can toggle on and off when we're in sampler mode. We'll clock in. We actually have a send return, which is really interesting. We can introduce a filter or something like that to actually process just the delays, not the dry signal coming into it. Left and right out, and left and right in. So a nice thing worth noting with Magneto is when we go mono in, we can process in stereo and get stereo outputs. So let's take a look at some patches. All right, so this first patch that we have set up, I just wanted to do something really simple just so we can kind of hear the sound quality and the capabilities of the Magneto. So we just have the Renee doing a very basic sequence, running into the Optimix, being controlled with a contour for some envelope. So this is just a very plucky patch, and we just have it going right into the Magneto just through the left mono in. So I'm going to start out dry, start my sequence up, and we're going to bring in the wet gradually. Now you'll notice nothing happening, and that's because we don't have any of the 4 playheads enabled. In order to get some delays going, we just turn on one of the playheads. Now the buttons below here are actually feedback. They toggle the feedback on and off. So let's start with that playhead. Introduce another one gradually. And you can hear it kind of moving around against the time. So we place this one right on time. This one a little late. Bring it all four now. Turn the feedback on for all four. So one of the really cool features of the Magneto is if I switch into shift mode, we actually get a shimmer effect on our repeats. Again, all that's just coming from the Magneto. So for the looper mode, we're going to kind of set all these back here to their null positions. Take our play heads down and punch the feedback out. So let's hear what we got. We're going to play that sequence right through it. So the looper mode is actually similar to the sample mode, which we'll get into in a moment, but in order to start recording our sound on sound, we use the tap button. So I'm going to punch in and punch out a loop. Take that dry down. So now we're just dealing with our loop here. So much like a sound on sound looper pedal, we have control over the pitch and time on one knob. Let's see what happens when we bring these other tape heads into it. So we're still in that shimmer mode. I'm going to pop out of that. So this is really cool in perhaps a performance setting where we just have a loop going. No dry. We could be repatching right now, getting something else together, and reintroduce it into Magneto. What's interesting to point out, I guess, is that the spring reverb is completely independent of the delay. Even if we have the delay totally off, we still have access to that spring reverb. There's actually a jumper on the back where we can switch it and we can use the spring reverb almost as a separate module completely. Okay, so for this final patch, we're going to explore sample mode. I've broken down my patch and have patched up a basic, simple kick and snare pattern. We're just sequencing that from the Variegate 8. Going into my left input here, so let's hear what that sounds like. Cool, so with the tap tempo button, I'm going to capture my sample and punch back out. All right, take that dry down now. And so that's our sample. The sample mode has this really interesting feature of transport control, which actually isn't available on the other two modes. So with this, we can actually do tape stalls, we can do start stops, we can actually play this loop forward and reverse, and loop it indefinitely. Reverse. We can do our tape stalls. Start back up. So for this, I'm also going to introduce some CV control into this. I'm going to take a patch cable, and I'm going to take another gate out from the Variegate 8 Plus, and we're going to play with the forward-backward. Very cool. Play with that infinite loop. And let's play with that tape stall. Pretty fun. So thanks so much everyone for taking a look at the Magneto with us today. We're really excited to have Strymon finally represented in Eurorack and couldn't be more stoked to see what they're going to come up with next. If you guys have any questions about this or any other Eurorack modules, feel free to contact us at vintageking.com or hit up your sales reps.